So we left off the last video having seen how to copy individual records in F#. So we had this record type that you can see here at the top. We created a record first with the standard approach, just providing the parameters. And myRecord2 was initialized by using myRecord1 and then specifying which parameters to alter here. I want to follow the same concept, but just show you how this scales as we move over to more complex structures. Before we do that, let's quickly recap also the result we got. So we could see that the first record here had 1, 2, 3 as elements, and the second record kept the 1 for the x variable because we never specified that we wanted to change x here, but we specified new values for y and z, and those are reflected here. So one consideration you might have is how do we actually generalize this if we have more complex records? So let's take these ones that we had before, but we make them a bit more complex by saying that this is, for example, a list here. And in this one, we might make a completely new type. Let's call that nested record. And also make it a list of these. Now, obviously, this is going to break the code because these values here are no longer adequate. So if we provide a list for our input values here, that should be fine. Let's do the same here, so we can just put in a 1 like that. Okay. We need to create a new type of record here, a nested record. So let's do that as well. And again, we're just doing this to follow the same concept, but to add more complex structures that we would like to copy. For this one, we're going to call the variables a and b, and the first one is going to be an integer, and the second one we're going to let be a list of integers, like so. Okay, so z variable here needs to be replaced, obviously. So let's create a new value. Let's call it nested record 1, and we're going to initialize this with the standard way that we did also in the last video. Nested record, and then a, we'll set that to be 7. And then for the second variable, nested record dot b, we're going to let that be a list, like we said. Let's just give it values of 43, 2, like that, something arbitrary. Okay, let's create another one as well. So we have two variables to work with. We're going to call this nested record 2. And we can use the copying approach that we're now familiar with. So let's say I want to keep the records from the first one I created. So then I'll say that this is going to be nested record 1. But then I can also specify that I want to change, let's say, the list that we have in the b parameter. So nested record dot b, and in this case we can just make it 6 and 7, like that. Okay, now we have these two nested records, and we can then amend this overarching record because recall we needed to specify in the z parameter a list of nested records. So let's simply do that. Then we're just going to put in the nested records that we created, like that. Okay, so the first record now works appropriately, and then we have the second record. Now, let's say we wanted to create this as a copy of the first one, and then create some funny changes in, let's say, one of these arrays. So if we, before doing that, execute myRecord1 just to see what that looks like, and then we'll think about what we want to change. So the output here, you can see this is our record 1. So we have the first two sort of regular parameters. The x value, we gave it a number of 1. The y value, we gave it a list of 3, 4, 5. And then we said for the z variable, that's going to be a list of 2 records, nested record 1, nested record 2. You can see nested record 1 here, that part. So you can see that the parameters there are 7 like we specified, and then a list 43, 2. Nested record 2, on the other hand, keeps the a variable from nested record 1 because we copied that over, so we can see a 7 here. And then we updated the array here to still reflect 6 and 7. So let's say we want a new record to keep all of these parameters that we saw in myRecord1, but we just want to remove, let's say, this array. We want to make that blank for the second one. How would we do that in the simplest way? We would say we create myRecord2, and we will begin by saying we're going to start with myRecord1 as the baseline, and then we use this with parameter. And to make this more easily sort of readable, we're going to put this on 2 different lines. So the only parameter we really want to change in the new record is going to be the Z parameter, because in here, that's where we have this value that we now want to update. So let's remove the change we made to the Y parameter and just say Z. Okay. And Z needs to be a list of records, right? So this is going to be a list. And we said that we want to keep the previous behavior. So we want to keep this list, nested record 1, nested record 2, but we want to alter nested record 2. So we can copy nested record 1 here. And then instead of copying over nested record 2, we'll create a new record in here. So we want to make an alteration to this nested record 2, right? In the new structure. We said we want to remove this array. So I can't copy it directly because it contains some values that I don't want. But what I can do is use the copying strategy that we already discussed. So I can create a new record here and say that this is going to be nested record 2 with an alteration to the B variable. So nested record dot B, and we're going to set that to be an empty array. Now this should give us the exact same structure that we had before. Only difference is the B variable here of the second nested record should be empty. So let's try and execute, if I can highlight everything. There we go. The second record. And if you see this here, let me actually execute both of them at the same time so we can compare. There we go. If we compare these 2 records, you can see that they are identical, except for the fact that the B variable here is empty. So that gives you an example of how to copy nested records when there are more complex structures involved. Now, this will of course grow more complex as your structures grow more complex as well, but in principle, that allows you to also generalize the concept that we discussed in the previous video. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and see you in the next one.